Have you ever stood in front of an ancient sculpture, or maybe a painting that's centuries old, and just thought, how? How did they actually do that? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that whole process. Let's dive into the incredible journey from an idea, from deep knowledge, all the way to a timeless masterpiece.
So this is the big question, right? How does it happen? It's really not just about some random flash of inspiration. It's about a deep, often invisible foundation of wisdom and a total mastery of physical materials and techniques. So where does that journey even begin?
It starts right here, with what I like to call the unseen blueprint. Before a single piece of stone gets carved or one brushstroke is laid down, there's this entire foundation of knowledge that shapes everything, and I mean everything, that comes next. We're talking about something called traditional knowledge, and you should think of it less like a dusty old textbook and way more like a culture's living DNA. It's this code passed down from one generation to the next that holds everything from survival skills to, you guessed it, artistic expression. It's the collective memory of a people. What's so amazing is how this knowledge gets around. It's hardly ever written down. Instead, it's passed from one person to another, through stories, through songs, through just doing things together. It's like a living library, born from literally centuries of watching the world, and it really reflects what a community cares about. This knowledge is alive, and it's deeply tied to a place and its people. Okay, so you have this abstract knowledge. How does it actually become a physical thing? How does it get turned into a three-dimensional form you can touch? Let's start with two of the most basic materials you can think of in sculpture: stone and metal.
An artist really has two main choices here, and each one is guided by their knowledge of the material. First up, you've got carving. The easiest way to think about this is like sculpting something from a block of cheese. You are subtracting material, chipping away until you find the shape inside. The key is, you can't add anything back. The other way is casting, and it's the total opposite. It's an additive process. Here, you're kind of like someone making a Jell-O mold. You make a mold first, and then you pour in your liquid material, say molten bronze, to create the final shape. This lets you make way more complex and even hollow sculptures.
And this brings up a wild point about history and what things are made of. Bronze was awesome, super versatile, but it was also really valuable. That's why most of the famous ancient Greek bronze statues we think we know are actually Roman marble copies made later. The originals, they were probably melted down hundreds of years ago to make swords or coins. It's a pretty powerful reminder of just how fragile art can be. So how did they make those incredibly detailed bronze statues in the first place? Well, with this absolutely ingenious technique called the lost wax process. It's so clever. Artists would make a perfect model out of wax, then build a clay mold around it, and then, here's the trick, they'd melt the wax out. That leaves a perfect, hollow space to pour the molten bronze into. The original wax model is lost forever, but in its place, a permanent metal sculpture is born. All right, so we've gone from shaping solid, 3D forms, and now we're going to shift our focus to the art of the surface, to the world of printmaking and painting. How do you get an image, a mark, from an artist's brain onto a piece of paper or a giant wall? When you're talking about printing, there are really two big opposite approaches. First, you've got relief printing. This one's easy to picture. It works exactly like a rubber stamp. You carve away everything you don't want to print, roll ink on the raised surface that's left, and press it down. Simple. The other method, Intaglio, is the reverse. Here, the artist cuts grooves into a metal plate. The ink settles down into those grooves, you wipe the surface clean, and then you use a ton of pressure to push the paper into those grooves to pick up the ink. The image is made by the lines that are cut in, not the parts left sticking up. Now, making art wasn't just about skill. It was also, believe it or not, about sacrifice. Because for a huge chunk of history, the very materials used to create such beauty were incredibly dangerous. The price for all that beauty was often paid with the artist's own health.
Just take a look at this. White lead, a super common white pigment, could cause brain and kidney damage. Cinnabar, which made this brilliant red color called vermilion, had mercury in it and could affect the nervous system. And orpiment, a vibrant yellow, was literally made from arsenic. Artists were risking their lives for the right color, grinding and handling these toxic powders day after day.
Okay, now let's see how all of these things, the knowledge, the techniques, the materials, come together on a truly massive scale. We're heading to India to check out a tradition of mural painting that goes back over 1,000 years. And this isn't just one style. It's a living tradition that changed and grew over centuries. You can see it from the expressive shapes of the Chalukya dynasty way back in the 6th century, all the way to the epic stories in the Vijayanagara period 1,000 years later. The styles change and build on each other. It's a visual record of history unfolding.
So how do we even tell these styles apart? Well, it's all in the specific details that were passed down through that traditional knowledge. At the famous Ajanta Caves, for example, a key feature is this serene, thoughtful look on the figures. Their eyes are half closed, like they're in meditation, and their gaze is pointed down. It gives you this powerful feeling of peace and quiet thought.
Art is also amazing because it tells the story of cultures meeting. In the Gandhara region, sculptures of the Buddha started to take on Greco-Roman features. You can totally see it in the way the robes are draped, almost like a Roman toga, and in the realistic, very Hellenistic style of the face. This wasn't just copying, it was a fusion. It's a visual of centuries of different people living and working together.
Another school is they developed their own completely unique styles. The Sarnath school, for instance, perfected this style of incredible elegance. The figures are slender, and the carving of the robes is so thin and done so masterfully that the fabric looks see-through. Art historians call it a wet look, as if the cloth is clinging to the body. Just imagine the skill it takes to make hard stone look like that.
So how in the world did these ancient murals last for so long? Many of them were made using the fresco technique. The name actually comes from the Italian word for fresh. Artists would paint directly onto wet plaster. As that plaster dried and hardened, a chemical reaction would lock the pigments in, making the painting a literal part of the wall. It's not on the wall, it's in the wall. That's why they're still here.
So after we've looked at the knowledge, the methods, the dangerous materials, what's the ultimate legacy of all this art? What does it all really mean in the end?
Well, for one thing, the scale of this legacy is just huge. In just one region of India, Kerala, archaeologists have found more than 60 different sites with these kinds of traditional mural paintings. This wasn't the work of just a few lone geniuses. This was the creative voice of an entire culture.
And really, that's what it all comes down to. The materials, the techniques, the long hours of sometimes dangerous work, it was all for this, to express the nature of the artist, of the culture, and of the subject, right there in the final piece.
And this brings us right back to where we started. A masterpiece isn't just some beautiful thing to look at. It's the physical proof, the final visible expression of a culture's most important and often invisible asset, its traditional knowledge. So, to wrap it all up, every piece of art starts with that unseen foundation of knowledge. The actual techniques an artist picks, like subtracting by carving or adding by casting, completely define what's possible. The materials themselves have a story, and sometimes it's a risky one. And in the end, the art that makes it through becomes this priceless record of our history and our creativity.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole process, it hasn't stopped. We are all creating and passing down knowledge right this second, through our digital tools, our code, our memes, our modern crafts. So the real question is, what is the traditional knowledge that we are creating today that will end up shaping the art and the culture of tomorrow?